Hey, hope you're doing well. Andy here from Drive Steady. And in this video, I'm reviewing a Dodge Charger Hellcat Redeye. So listen to this. This Charger Hellcat Redeye is the fastest and most powerful four-door sedan in the world. With almost 800 horsepower and a top speed of over 200 miles per hour, it puts up numbers that today's sports cars could only dream of. Now, the Charger name dates back to the 1960s, where muscle cars were the madness. They were the craze, and it was Mopar or no car. But now, the landscape has somewhat changed. So just because the Charger Hellcat Redeye has a bunch of horsepower and torque and a cool name, is it worth the money? What about it as a car, as a whole? What is its purpose? I mean, do you really need a 4,500 pound four-door sedan with almost 800 horsepower? I guess we're gonna find out in this review of the Dodge Charger Hellcat Redeye. Get another straight stretch, second gear now, mostly full gas. Oh wow, it pulls. All right, so let's start the review off by talking about this exterior color, and I love it. It's called Hellraisin. It's a shade of purple, and I give Dodge so much credit for offering these colors that are throwbacks to the 60s and the 70s when you had the old school muscle car Chargers and Challengers with the cool looking purples and the orange Go Mango and shades of blue. It's just so refreshing to see a color like this nowadays, because all you see now is shades of gray, white, black, and such dull colors. I like this so much. The one thing I do have to admit, I like the plum crazy purple shade a little bit more. That's just my opinion, but this Hellraisin color is actually really nice as well. So let's jump into the design a little bit on the front end. Starting off with this hood. So this hood is a brand new design for the 2021 model year, and it's got three functional vents. So this first one is a ram air effect on the hood cowl here. It's very aggressive. It doesn't have a high nature to it. It's just right. And then you have two extractor vents on each side here that are taking hot air out of the engine bay, and as I'm standing here next to one of these things, I can feel the heat coming out of it. It's definitely functional. As far as the hood, it's painted in satin black. This is a $2,000 option. The roof and the trunk are also painted in satin black. That adds another $1,500. So you're looking at $3,500 for satin black paint. I personally would skip it. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I like more exterior color paint, especially when you've got something as cool as this Hellraisin color. All right, the rest of the front end, talking about the headlights, these are very familiar. They were redesigned a couple years ago. They have the running LED light and a bi-xenon bulb. Let's move to the grille area where it's a little bit more interesting. So there's the upper and the lower grille. This upper grille is actually quite small. It's very unsubstantial, for the lack of a better term. And then you have something new here for 2021, this mail-in slot here. This is really cool looking, and it gives the Charger a little bit refreshed look. And then you come down to the three functional air inlets in the lower part of the bumper. All three of these are allowing cold air in. And a difference between the Redeye and the regular Hellcat is that the Redeye is allowing about 20% more air in, and trust me, this thing needs it because it has almost 100 horsepower more. Next, let's go down to the lower integrated front splitter. And I like how it's integrated because sometimes manufacturers will stick on a front lip splitter and it just looks totally out of place. This one looks nice and clean. Now you're asking yourself, what is this pink piece, Andy? Well, this is something that's supposed to protect that integrated front splitter during delivery or during shipment. for the Charger and for the Challenger as well. But this is supposed to come off during the PDI, the pre-delivery inspection, when you're buying the car brand new from the dealer. It even says to be removed at dealership. But some owners, they request not to remove it and the dealers oblige. But an interesting story behind this is this used to be painted in yellow. Now Dodge painted it in pink because they thought it would deter people away because of the color for whatever reason. But it doesn't seem to be making a difference because people continue, or owners continue, to leave this pink plastic piece on there. All right, now you're looking at the side profile of the Charger Hellcat Redeye. One cool thing and one interesting thing. Starting off with the interesting thing, the Charger is starting to show its age because it still has traditional door handles that you lift up. You don't see that anymore. It's really just the pull type of movement now when you do the keyless entry. It does have keyless entry, which is great. The M2 that I drove a couple weeks ago did not have that, which was really annoying and inconvenient. But anyway, the cool thing about the Charger from this angle, you can see it's got the wide body, flared fenders, and Dodge started doing this with the Challenger first and now has implemented it into the Charger. So much so that you cannot get a narrow body Charger anymore. You have to get a wide body, specifically if you want the Scatpack, the Hellcat, or this Hellcat Redeye. You can no longer get a Hellcat using the narrow body package. I personally don't mind that. I like the look of the wide body. I think it gives the Charger and as a matter of fact the Challenger as well a real presence. I like to call this a presence car. You can immediately notice it on the road. It's got a really menacing look with the wide body for the front and for the rear, and I just really like it in general. All right, now let's talk about the wheels, tires, and brakes on this Charger Hellcat Redeye. Starting off with these wheels, I absolutely love these wheels. These are probably one of my favorite production wheels of any manufacturer, and they suit this car, and these are also available on the Challenger perfectly as muscle car wheels. These are absolutely spot on. Kudos to Dodge for designing this wheel. They call this the devil wheel or the devil rim. It's a 10-spoke design, and what's even cooler about it is for the 2020 model year, of course this is a 2021, they bought the brass monkey finish back. This is the gold finish you see here. It's really cool. It looks perfect with this Hellraisin color paint. It's so different to see gold wheels from the factory, and I love it. They're great. These are a forged wheel. They do have a deep dish style nature as well. They're 20 inches on all four corners, 20 inches by 11. Imagine a 11-inch front wheel, so there's a lot of rim and tire in this package. Speaking of the tires, these are the Pirelli P0s. They're 305 section 35 on all four corners. So this is a square setup. Next, let's move inside the wheelbarrow. In the front, you have a smooth surface, no slots, no vents, 15.6-inch rotor in the front being bitten on by a black painted SRT Brembo brake. This is a 6-piston caliper. You can have it painted in red. This black color, interestingly, is an extra option. You have to pay extra. I believe it's about $500 to get it painted black. In the rear, it's, I believe, a 14.5-inch rotor with a 4-piston brake. So considering the size of this car, the brakes, the tires, and the wide wheels are really important, and I think Dodge has done a good job with the design and also offering a lot of tire for this 800 horsepower car. All right, now let's talk about the rear end of the Charger Hellcat Redeye, starting off with the spoiler. This looks really nice. It blends in with the rear end very well. It's proportionally sized to the size of the car. Sometimes what I see is spoilers or wings are so massive, they dominate the rear end, but this one flows in very well with the rear end of this Charger. Next, it's painted in black. I like that a lot. One interesting thing about it is that the spoiler itself is mounted onto the trunk, and the trunk doesn't occupy the entire width of the car. So you've got this little space where the spoiler is somewhat hanging in the air. There's a gap between it and the actual flesh of the car. So for those of you who wash your car and get annoyed with water being stuck underneath your spoiler, like I do in my GT350, this is just something I'm pointing out and I noticed because of my experience with my own car. Okay, next, let's talk about the trunk. Now, the Charger Redeye, or the Hellcat Redeye, has the benefit of being a Charger underneath the skin, and what that means is you get the same trunk space as a rental car. So there's 3 ways of opening the trunk. There's a button on the interior, there's a button on the key, and there's also a button right here next to the E of the Dodge lettering. You push that and you are greeted with a humongous amount of space. Now, I'm not kidding, you can probably fit 2 larger pieces of luggage in here and stack on some duffel bags. You should have no issues taking this on to a weekend getaway or doing all your day-to-day shopping. And even if you're a person who carries a lot of stuff with you, you will not have any issues dailying this car as far as storage space goes. You can probably even take this to Home Depot and buy those long pieces of plywood and stick them in here, because you can fold down the rear seats, giving you even more space. So no issues here. And an added bonus, of course, my favorite, there is a grab handle to close the trunk, and that allows me to not touch the exterior paint. So I grab this thing, I close it, and no fingerprints on the exterior paint. All right, now the rear end of the Charger Hellcat Redeye, and there really isn't much special going on up here. The taillights are all the same in the Chargers. The difference is here, obviously, you have a SRT Hellcat badge here, and the Charger lettering is blacked out. So one interesting thing back here are these side vents. These are real vents, they're actually functional. The reason why I'm surprised by that is when I see other cars, this is just a design element to make the rear end look wider, but not here in the Charger Hellcat Redeye, and it's functional. So I'm glad to see that Dodge is taking these things seriously. Next, let's move to the diffuser and the exhaust. The diffuser for the Charger is actually very plain. There isn't anything intricate. It's actually rather dull. It's just a plastic piece there just to have it. It does have the cutouts for the exhaust, which are dual exit. They're painted in black. They're actually satin black, or more of a flat black. So they look really good. They're of decent size, but what's most important is what they sound like. So let's take a listen. All right, so now the engine, which is the hallmark or the highlight, whatever you want to call it, of the Redeye, because this is a 6.2 liter supercharged 376 cubic inch V8 engine, making 797 horsepower and 707 pounds-feet of torque. It's absolutely mind-boggling that there's almost 800 horsepower in this 4-door sedan. So some of the notable things that have changed as far as on paper goes, the red line is 6,500 versus 6,200 in the regular Hellcat, and the boost is turned up because you have a bigger supercharger here. This is a 2.7 liter supercharger compared to the 2.4 or the 2.5, I want to say, in the regular Hellcat, and it pushes, instead of 11.6 pounds of boost, this is pushing 14.5 pounds of boost. So much boost here, and it's 800 horsepower, guys. It's really remarkable what's going on here with Dodge and these Hellcat engines, because typically what you see is horsepower gets old. And what I mean by that is, for example, when it became 300 horsepower, 400 horsepower, 500 horsepower, and then after a certain point, you're just like, whatever, 500 horsepower. My Camry has 300 horsepower now. But that is never going to happen to these Hellcat engines, because 800 horsepower, just never gets old, especially from the factory with a warranty. So this is truly remarkable. Now let's get into a little bit more detail as far as the performance numbers go. 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, 10.6 seconds in the quarter mile at above 125 miles per hour. The regular Hellcat, as comparison, is 10.9 seconds. And then the weight in this, which is always the thing that's talked about with these Dodge muscle cars like the Challenger and the Charger. This Charger weighs almost 4,600 pounds, 4,587, and it's a rear-wheel driven car with a 8-speed automatic transmission. The interesting thing is you cannot get a manual in the Charger, but you can in the Challenger, so you can get a Hellcat with a 6-speed manual. All right, as far as fuel economy goes, now don't laugh, I'm gonna get to something here which is really interesting. This is 12 in the city, 21 in the highway for a combined average of 15. Now this is expectedly terrible for such a big motor with so much horsepower, but what's even more interesting is how much gas this thing consumes, at the rate in which it consumes it. And now I didn't really drive around really crazy and such, but I noticed that the needle was going down as I was driving this thing around. So much so that Dodge says if you go full throttle and you've got a full tank of gas, you will end in empty in about 10 minutes. All right, so now the interior portion of the review for the Challenger Hellcat Redeye. And the first thing you notice in here is that this is a rather large space. It feels big in here. Even when I've got the seat lowered to its lowest position, I feel like I'm sitting on top of the car as opposed to in the car where you feel in some sports cars. But anyway, let's move to a little bit more of the details here, starting off with the seat. So this is a extremely comfortable seat. It is not the most aggressive seat that you will sit in, so do not have that expectation. The bolstering is decent. It's not adjustable, it's fixed, but if you are a larger size individual, you will not have any issues sitting in this seat. As far as if you're concerned that it's too snug, it is not too snug whatsoever. The adjustments are the same, forwards, backwards, nothing very extraordinary. You do have some lumbar support. As far as aggressiveness, this is a average at best seat, but as far as comfort, it's an A+. This is a really comfortable seat. Now let's move to the steering wheel. It's all leather, which I like and I prefer. I'm not a big fan of Alcantara steering wheels, so this is really good for me. The diameter, the size of the wheel is pretty large. It's substantial. The thickness is average. It's not thick and it's not thin, so it's pretty good. Then the paddle shifters, I mean, they're just normal paddle shifters, nothing to complain about. They are mounted a little high here. I feel like I have to have my hands or my fingers at an angle. They're not mounted all the way down flush to the back of the steering wheel. There are buttons back here to raise and lower the volume and change the tracks, which is convenient if you always have your hands on the steering wheel. I know some people only drive with one hand, but anyway, we're not getting into that. The steering wheel has multi-control buttons to answer calls and to navigate through your gauge cluster, which I'm about to jump into now. So your gauges. The special thing about the Hellcat Redeye is that it has a 220 mile per hour speedometer, and that's to accommodate the over 200 mile per hour speed that this car can attain. 203 miles per hour to be exact. 200 on a gauge is already crazy. To see something above 200, like 220 in this car, is just, I've never seen it before. Otherwise, the gauges are very clear to read. You have a analog speed and tachometer, speedometer, tachometer, and you've got a little gauge here in the center that gives you a plethora of information, such as your transmission temperature, your coolant temperature, your radio, your infotainment. All of that stuff is built in here in the center section. And Dodge's system, even though it's somewhat dated, it is extremely simple to use, and it's got a really nice interface. The infotainment screen is the same one that you've seen for years now. It's actually really good. One thing I like about it a lot is that it allows you to individually tailor the drive mode. So your steering, your suspension, your transmission, and of course you've got the red and the black key, which allows you to toggle between 500 and 797 horsepower. So that's always cool. You don't really see that in a lot of cars where they individually allow you to tailor things. To see that that exists in this car is really good. So I'm not going to go into really much detail about the infotainment system. It's widely covered, and my overall perspective of it is that it's easy to use, it's simple, it's a touchscreen. The only negative downside to it is that it's starting to show its age as far as its performance. It's slow when you toggle through screens and things like that. Otherwise, it's totally functional, no concerns. And then you've got the transmission selector. So this is an old school style. It's a pull down and move back up. You pull it all the way down for D, you move it to the left, and that puts you in manual shifting mode. And then obviously back in the same direction to put it in park. And then down from the gear lever, you have 2 cup holders, and even further back, you have a substantial center storage area. You can fit 2 sunglass cases in here and your cell phone, and there's a little tray here to put your coins. So no issues as far as center stack. And then you've got the glove compartment and map pockets on each door, so no concerns as far as storage goes. And then in this car, you have a optional sunroof, which is pretty nice, and you don't really have to think about weight and it adding weight because this is already a heavy car. So in my opinion, if I was getting this car, I would get the sunroof. It's really cool. You slide it back and you've got that open air feel inside of a black car like this. It gives it a little bit more roominess or airiness. All right, and now since this is a 4-door car, let's cover the back seats really quickly. This is a ample amount of room. I am sitting behind myself here in the passenger side, and you can see I've got plenty of leg room, and the cushioning is actually really comfortable in this car. It's a really nice back seat. I could easily see myself sitting next to myself with plenty of center room here. I do have heated seats. I mean, gosh, there's heated seats in this 800 horsepower car for the passengers. I've got 2 USB plug outlets here. The interesting thing, there is no center armrest. You can't pull this piece down, which is something I'm surprised about. But anyway, the space back here is more than enough, no concerns to carry around 4 people. All right, so overall, this interior, it's a functional interior because this is not what this car is about. It's about all the horsepower and the performance. The interior is functional, that's the best way to put it. The infotainment is functional, nothing really special going on in here. The back seats are comfortable, more than enough room to fit 4 people in here. I do have heated seats, but overall, just a plain old interior, decent quality. So now let's move to the driving portion of the review. All right, now the driving portion of the review, and as always, the key. This is the red key, and of course, if you're familiar with what the Hellcat engines offer as far as keys, you have a black key and then the red key like this one, and the difference between the two is that this one gives you the full power of the engine, in this case 797, but overall it does look okay. It does have the SRT badging here with the Hellcat Redeye logo with the red dot, so I do appreciate that level of attention. It is a plastic key. My expectations in general for keys are not the highest, but this is okay. I have seen worse in a lot more expensive cars, so this is okay. It's acceptable. All right, now the visibility. Out front, when I look out front, I can see the hood cowl and the heat extractor, so it's telling me that I'm in something a little bit more special than just a regular Challenger or Charger. And out the sides, no issues here. I do have blind spot monitoring. I do have the windows behind me. This is a 4-door sedan. I typically don't find 4-door sedans to have severe blind spots, and in the Charger it's no different. Out the back, I can see clearly with the mirror. I do have a rear view camera, and I do have parking sensors and audible warnings when I'm getting close to something. Otherwise, the visibility is great. Now, as far as the price goes for this Charger Hellcat Redeye, the base price is $80,000, basically $81,000. It does have a gas guzzler tax. Remember I told you how terrible the gas mileage was? Well, that's going to cost you something, $2,100 on top of that. So already out the gate, you're at $83,000. Now, the way this car sits, there's an additional $6,000 in options on this. The sunroof, the satin painted hood, roof, and trunk, that's an additional $3,500. So the way this car sits, you're looking at about $86,000 or $87,000 prior to tax. If the counties and the states that you live in have sales tax, you have to factor that in as well. So for California, this car is almost $100,000 car. Let's call it $95,000, give or take, considering we have a 9.5% tax here. But it's pretty expensive, but let's see if it's worth it. Let's turn this thing on and go for a drive. All right, so foot on the brake, red start stop button. Sounds okay. It definitely doesn't tell me that I've got 800 horsepower underneath my right foot, but what it does tell me is when I turn the car on, it says red key in use. Just in case you forgot you have 800 horsepower, it reminds you just before you get rolling. So about getting rolling, let's go ahead and do that. So as far as the seats go, remember I told you they're very comfortable, but the thing about the driving position in this car is that you feel like you're sitting on top of the car. As opposed to in other cars, when you're sitting inside, you're sitting on the chair, it feels like you're sitting inside, like you're sitting on the floor of the car. It's almost like the car is hugging you. But in this car, I feel like I'm sitting on the sunroof. Like I'm sitting really high, and mind you, my seat is actually in its lowest setting. But anyway, forget about the driving position. Let's go ahead. I'm greeted with a straight stretch of road immediately. I'm going to go ahead and put it in custom, and what I like to do in custom is I give it the full power 797, and everything else stays in street mode, and I'll explain to you why here as I'm driving. But for now, let's just go ahead and give it some gas. Woo! Losing traction. Wow. This is a really fast car. This is blisteringly fast. I've obviously driven this off camera a couple times, and this is the fastest feeling car I've ever driven. This car is unbelievably fast. Unbelievably fast. It pulls like a freight train all the time. Now, I have recently driven the Shelby GT500, and at that time I had only driven the Hellcat, the regular one, prior to that, and I thought the GT500 was the fastest car I'd ever driven and fastest feeling. But this kind of takes the cake, guys, and the way it delivers the power is completely different. The GT500 feels very balanced and controllable and confidence inspiring. This just feels raw and just, I'm gonna punch you in the face with a bunch of horsepower. I'm gonna lose the back out, and I'm gonna let you have some fun, but I'm gonna keep you from dying, as far as that's the traction control talking to you. But this is an extremely brutally fast car. Let's give it some more gas. Wow, the supercharger noise is very satisfying as well. But the traction control does a great job of keeping you alive. However they've tuned it very well. Let's get another straight stretch. Second gear now, mostly full gas. Oh wow, it pulls. It kind of takes your breath away with the speed. This is the fastest car I've ever driven by a margin. Now the brake pedal, I'm going at a fairly decent speed, and the brake pedal, you really have to give it some effort in order for it to give you brake power or stopping power. Unlike the M4 or the M2 CS I drove recently, that one had bite right at the top. It was very, very sensitive. This one, you really got to roll into that brake pedal to get the power that you're looking for, especially for a car this powerful. Yeah, that's the braking feel. It's not a bad brake. It does feel adequate and stop you, but that's like the pedal feel, the engagement. Now, as far as going back to these driving modes, so you've got transmission. I just leave that in street. You can put it in sport or track, whatever you want. It makes really not much of a difference. The transmission shifts good already on upshifts and on downshifts. But as far as traction goes, I always leave that in sport. I mean in street. And the reason for that is you can see it was just like losing it all over the place. And if you want to stay alive, or you don't want to claim to your insurance that you hit your car or whatever, or ran into a ditch, I recommend you leave that in street mode. As far as the suspension, the highest I will put it in, or the most aggressive I will put it in, is street. And the reason for that is when you put it in track, it just feels so bumpy. Like, it's almost like they're trying to hide the weight of this car, and this is a heavy car and it does roll. It's almost like they're trying to hide that artificially with the suspension and making it really stiff with the magnetic shocks or the adaptive shocks. So I really don't like it. It doesn't feel natural. The highest, like I said, I will go is sport as far as the suspension goes. Now the steering, it's not the best steering in street mode. It does have deadness in the center. It feels okay for the street. Sport is good. It gives you a nice balance between way too fake and a little bit too much jelly. But that's as high as I go. Track mode is, again, just like in suspension mode. It feels way, way too heavy, and it's almost like a poser type of feel where, like, too much heaviness, too much weight. It's almost like it's like a chore to steer the car, and you don't want that. You don't need that. But overall, the speed is just blisteringly fast. It's faster than you expect it to be. If that makes any sense, that's how I feel about it. I came into this with expectations. Oh yeah, the GT500. Yeah, that's pretty quick. This is maybe what 30 more horsepower than that. It's a heavier, but this is blisteringly, unbelievably fast. The power delivery is mind-boggling, and the supercharger noise is really sweet as well. But as far as daily driving this car, I see no issues, absolutely none, with daily driving this car. It's big, it's comfortable, it's roomy, and I see kind of not many flaws with it, other than it's just a functional interior. If you're expecting something that's like all leather all over the place and a bunch of fancy looking material and all that stuff, you're going to be disappointed. But overall, from a functional perspective, on a day-to-day basis, you can put a lot of stuff in the trunk, you can put people in the back, you got plenty of space in the front, no issues whatsoever. Now, as far as the value proposition, this is basically a $100,000 car. Now, in my opinion, after driving it and experiencing it for roughly a little bit over a day, I personally would just go for the regular Hellcat. If I wanted all of that speed, you're paying an additional like $10,000 for the extra 70 or 80 horsepower, and the Hellcat feels super fast already. I feel like there isn't a lot of value here, and I personally would skip the Hellcat Redeye, and I would actually just go for the Scatpack. The Scatpack has 500 horsepower, and it's got the same interior, same transmission, everything is the same, and it's plenty fast enough, and you're gonna save like $50,000 if you do that. So in my opinion, is this car worth the price tag? No, I certainly wouldn't pay for it. If you're somebody who's got a sports car and you need this on like a 4-door rocket just to put in your arsenal, yeah, sure. If you got $100K to spend, go for it. But if not, just go for the Hellcat or just go for the Scatpack. That's my honest opinion. But not to say that this is a bad car. This is not a bad car in any stretch of the imagination. I just wouldn't spend the money for it. So that's pretty much all I've got. If I didn't answer any of your questions, please put them down in the comments below, or send me a DM on Instagram at DriveSteady. So with that, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.